Now, that's the way that the system works now. For our money, and I won't prejudge, I will not prejudge the outcome of the Scottish Clean Piece of Paper project, but as far as I'm concerned, it has to be the countries with a particular interest in a fishery, those who actually do fish a particular set of waters, are those who need to sit down with the industry, firstly, the scientists, the NGOs, and the communities to come up with a system of management that works. Now, I think we have plenty examples of best practice. There's the way it works in Iceland, very different to the way it works in Faroes. And that's where Mr. Gudfinsson's presentation yesterday was so fascinating, just to tease out the differences already in how different places do it. But where there might not be a one-size-fits-all, there are better ways of doing it than we do right now. And that's the project that, after 9 months of being the Government of Scotland, we've started. That's the project that I hope you guys will be part of.
Thank you very much for that. We have a number of threads going at the same time here. I'm not sure how much longer to keep the discussion going, but I would like to maybe return back to the last couple of comments before Alan's question there with respect to the fishing industry and CO2 emissions. Johanna suggested that the simple solution is to reduce the size of the fleet. This both makes fisheries more sustainable and also reduces CO2. The other point about focusing more on passive gear rather than trawling, also as a way to reduce emissions. I'm wondering, are there others who have some comments on these proposals? Please.
I'm Cleo Pascal. I'm an associate fellow at Chatham House, which is the Royal Institute of International Affairs in the UK. One of the things we look at is global food security, and it's a huge concern, and the fisheries fits into a perceived decline in global access to protein. If you're comparing the CO2 emissions resulting from fisheries compared to the CO2 emissions from livestock produces dramatically more CO2 emissions than fisheries do. And we're going to see also decreases in accessibility of soy-based protein as well. So I think for geopolitical reasons, you'll see increased pressure to increase fisheries as a global protein source. And any of these discussions have to fit into that global picture.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's certainly a very interesting point, and I think perhaps the focus there might rather be when we talk about CO2 emissions. Certainly there's been some study done in the Faroes that indicates that we have the highest per capita level of emissions in the world, and this is related to the consumption of fuel by the fishing industry in particular. But another way of looking at it is, of course, is the relationship between emissions of CO2 and production of protein, as you point out. We're talking about global food security as well. Please.
I'm Peter Rines from University of Washington. I would sort of direct this to Helle Siegstad, perhaps to others. It seems with the increasing pressure on fisheries, increasing demand worldwide, it's essential to know the latest about the argument of for example, cod disappearance relative to overfishing versus climate change. It's an old argument about whether those massive cycles in the western subpolar Atlantic were due to fishing pressure or due to temperature, environmental change. And I think we'd all like to hear the latest and best idea of the current state of that debate from anyone. I was thinking of Helle Siegstad as one person.
Hello, would you like to address that? What's the current thinking on the relationship between fishing and climate in terms of the cod, still not having come back?
I'm not quite sure if I'm the right person to answer that. In Greenland, we for sure had a long time with very cold climate, and there was almost no cod, very, very few cod. What we see now, and what we know about in the 1960s, when the cod start disappearing, we might have been able to keep the stock if we have made a better management, I guess. And we don't know at this point. But I know in Norway there has been cod going up and down. I don't know if Michaela has any knowledge on the latest.
In the Barents Sea, the temperatures never dropped that far down. So, of course, Greenland is the most exposed area to these dramatic temperature changes. But some model work show that actually the fisheries, if you go out of the very kind of extreme areas, it seems as if fishing activity is the most important one. That is done in a modeling work in a kind of for the Barents Sea cod in the Barents Sea to see if the kind of prognosis of temperature, climate change would have more effect or the kind of the oscillations have more effect on the stock than the fisheries. And the fisheries definitely seem to have the most, the management regime seems to be the most important factor.
Thank you for that. I might add myself that I suppose the 6 million harp seals might have something to do with the situation as well. Tomer, yes, sorry, please.
Just a little comment on that bottom up versus top down. I think it's important to know in some places, some ecosystems, maybe like the Barents Sea, this top down is more important. But I'm pretty convinced that other ecosystems like the northeastern Atlantic, it's much more bottom up actually. The subpolar gyre I showed, changes in the ocean circulation really directly influences primary production, secondary production, zooplankton, pelagic species. And that signal is very clear, especially just northeastern Atlantic. So that directly influences the Faroe Islands, and that is that's a natural variability that is in the system. So if we're going to predict what's going to happen here, I think we should use the knowledge of how this ocean climate is varying. So in some places, certainly it's top down. In other places, especially these pelagic species, it's a very strong bottom up, and we can actually understand that from knowing ocean physics.
And can I ask you just to follow up on that? We heard from Boye Hansen yesterday that the models are getting better with respect to oceanography. I mean, this presumably also perhaps goes to Michaela as well. The models for looking at the interactions between the different components, the different trophic levels. What are your views on? I mean, is there obviously this is an ongoing process in scientific work, but can we say that the models have improved in recent years?
You know, we love to play around with models. We hardly ever use them for anything other than thinking and playing. So, of course, there is quite a lot of we get a lot of understanding from our models, but we're not good in quantifying them. And especially a typical example is the ICS system, where we still use the old VPA in our assessments. We count how many fish we had last year and the year before, and it's just kind of counting fish in each age group, and by that we know how much we may have next year. There is a few examples on pelagic fish where we introduce a multi-species model, but still the Barents Sea cod and the cod assessments throughout, and most of the ground fish stocks, they are assessed in a one-species model, or if we're happy, we might even have a model. In the Barents Sea cod, we have something today called Gadget. There might be 2-3 people understanding how it's really running. And it's supporting the VPA. But we're really not having the ecosystem models to assess and use for our best advice at the moment. We play around, we learn from them, but we don't have the right tool to use for our advice.
Any other comments or questions to any of the speakers from this morning? I think given the time, it's nearly 12:30. We've already nearly a half an hour over our time limit. So I'm not going to try and sum up now. I'd just like to thank you all very much. Thank the speakers in particular, and everybody else. Thank you. It's been a very good session.